as far as I knew, my birth mother was very young when she had me. She was 16. And, my father could have been, one of two Colombian men. And that was pretty much the extent of what I knew. A few other details, like my mother had, two older brothers, but that was, all the information I had. I knew she was an immigrant from China, and she didn't, settle in well and struggled. And so, if I didn't have that information, when you go to uncover something, you don't know what that dynamic can be. Like I have an idea of, okay, my mother was too young when she had me and she wanted to put me up for adoption. So I had the opportunity to grow up in a family, a close-knit family.
Welcome back to Quiet the Clock. I am so extremely excited for our next guest for many, many reasons. One being you're male, and we've wanted more males on here. But the biggest reason is that Drew has been behind the cameras since the very beginning of Quiet the Clock and has been incredible. And now we were joking offline that little did he know that he would end up in front of the cameras with me, but he's been along for this journey and this ride from the beginning, has always made me feel so extremely comfortable because this is all very new for me. So I was thrilled. I'm thrilled to have you here, always behind the cameras, but now in front of the cameras. And what's been really awesome too about your participation in this is that you're really invested in what we're doing. And I feel like every episode that we wrap, you're like, oh my God, that was awesome. I've learned so much. This was so interesting. So I'd love to hear, as someone that's been part of this since the beginning and behind the cameras, like what have you learned so far listening to all these episodes, and what's like been some interesting takeaways for you?
Oh man, well, first off, I'm so happy to be on the show. It's been a journey. It's been a journey. Started from behind the camera, made it to in front of the camera. Yeah. What have I learned? I'll tell you what, Beth, I probably never would have listened to a podcast like this if it wasn't for being part of it, right? But there's so much value in what I got out of it. Everything from communication style, attachment style, healthy relationship habits. That in itself is something that I'll most definitely take. But then hearing from a different perspective, because hear these candid conversations of these women that, I most likely wouldn't have, from like the dating aspect, or even just the mindset of like, hey, women in their mid-20s are really, thinking about, okay, I want to start a family, and up against this biological clock, which, I grew up with a sister and a mother. And, as much as I got, familiar with, the female things day to day, that wasn't something that was on my radar. So it wasn't until, being part of this production that hearing, here's this concern and thought that these women have to go through. And then, that's the stress, throw that into the mix with, being in the dating scene, the pressures of, finding the right person and what that looks like, and knowing how muddied the dating pool can be, really. And
we're going to talk about that because if you're okay, you're back in the dating pool. I think that I appreciate everything that you're saying. And it's so amazing to have a male say that, because I think that many men, and like you said yourself, might not know sort of these journeys or what like women go through when they're thinking about the biological clock, or like the time's running out, or, men certainly have pressures as they go through dating too, but then they maybe don't have that other layer of like, I'm this age. And so I appreciate you saying that you get that perspective, having been part of this.
Sure. Yeah. It's been fun. It's a lot of fun. So
a lot of fun. Well, one of the things I want to start with that I think is going to be so much value to our audience, and I so appreciate that you have been an open book through all of this too, and shared a lot about your own journey and your life. And so I really want you to share your adoption story, because I think it's really helpful in many ways. And I think back to our guest LT, who, she really wants a biological child, and adoption maybe is not on her radar. And I think maybe a lot of women find themselves there. So I love your story and your perspective as someone that is adopted.
Absolutely. And, so I was adopted when I was a month old, born in New York, and it was a close adoption. So I never knew who my birth parents were. my whole life I knew I was adopted. My adopted parents, I've a fantastic family, and they were nothing but supportive. I have a sister. She's 2 years older than I am, and she was adopted as well. But she was born in Korea. And so the dynamic that we have is fantastic. My sister and I have obviously been able to bond over, having that similarity, though we do have a lot of differences because our stories are just different. And interestingly enough, about a little over a year ago, I had someone reach out to me on Ancestry DNA. It was wild. About 7 years ago, I did the DNA test, and
I didn't know that part of the story. You did it 7 years ago, and then you had someone reach out. I knew that someone reached out to you a year ago. Oh,
yeah, it was one of those Black Friday sale. Hey, everyone's doing it. It's very popular. Like, give it a go. See, I knew what I was. I knew, from my adoption records that I was half Colombian, half Chinese. So I was like, yeah, let me try it. And just, I had more interest in that. I really didn't think I was gonna be connected with anyone. And so I did it, and I saw some connections, but it was all distant. It was, mostly like fourth, fifth cousins, and that's very far away. Yeah. And so, I thought nothing of it, looked through it a bit, and I would go in and check in. Like, you could log in and it updates every so often. It'll update like the results and show, I guess they update the database so you can see, updated ethnicity estimates. So, every once in a blue moon, I will log in. And a little over a year ago, I logged in and I saw I had a message, and it was from a second cousin.
Oh, they messaged you through oh, wow. Oh my gosh.
And it was, hey cousin, like, I see we're related. How are we connected? And I got it about 2-3 weeks after he actually sent it. So I messaged him right away, and I was like, hey, I really have no clue. I'm adopted. I was adopted when I was a month old. It was a closed adoption. So I really have no clue. And, he responded, said, well, do you want to know? Because he was really big into genealogy. Right. So, he told me initially, he was like, yeah, I traced the family heritage back to like 600 BCE. I did all this research. Yeah, it's a hobby of his. So I said, yeah. And, that conversation was like, well, why do you want to know? Like, what are you going to do, if we find out? Because when you uncover that, you really don't know what the history is.
Well, yeah. And I know your story, and I know the difference between your and your sister's story. So that's very true. You don't know what you're going to.
As far as I knew, my birth mother was very young when she had me. She was 16. And, my father, it could have been, one of two Colombian men. And that was pretty much the extent of what I knew. A few other details, like my mother had, two older brothers, but that was, all the information I had. I knew she was an immigrant from China, and she didn't, settle in well and struggled. And so, if I didn't have that information, when you go to uncover something, you don't know what that dynamic can be. Like, I have an idea of, okay, my mother was too young when she had me, and she wanted to put me up for adoption. So I had the opportunity to grow up in a family, a close-knit family. And so, when he said, do you want to find out? You're like, why? Like, I said, yeah, I do. And so it was a wild week.
I know you have to, like, I keep saying this to you. You have to do your own documentary or podcast on this journey, because I think there's just so many layers to it and parts, and I'm telling you, journal on it, write on it. Like, it's ongoing.
Yeah, it's ongoing, and still to this day, it's still ongoing. So in the following week after that, did all the research, and I had like a whiteboard out, connecting all the dots.
Picture this documentary with your yeah.
It was wild, and it was an emotional experience for me. The only thing I could relate it to is if you've ever lost someone in death, because there'd be these moments where I just become emotional, just like I'd be going throughout the day, and just like there'd just be a trigger, thinking like, wow, this is what I'm going through, because for forever I had that perspective, like, hey, I know I have a family out there, or like, I know it.
Yeah.
But then, once we started uncovering things, I started having conversations with some of the family members. Because I was making phone calls. I was searching through social media and looking through public records, and I would be reaching out and be like, hey, my name's Drew Sutton. I've been doing research on my history and through, my genealogy, and the calls would be like, hey, I think I'm related to you.
Wow. So like prior to doing the Ancestry to Come, did you have interest in like finding things out? Like, did it, I don't know. I'm also curious about like your relationship with your adopted family. Like, I know I want you to talk more to that because I think that women often don't consider adoption thinking that it won't be as close knit or it won't be this like.
Yeah. That's a great question. There were points in my life where I thought about it. There were certain things that were almost like a trigger in the sense where it's like, hey, yeah, I am adopted. Like, or if you saw something on a TV show that was talking about it, and it would make me think about it. Mm-hmm. And I knew it was a closed adoption, and I knew I really couldn't do anything until I was older. And then once I got old enough, I kind of fell off of it a little bit. I heard stories. I met people who were adopted as well, and heard different, journeys that they had. And I just never really pushed for it. I was able to go through the adoption agency and get information, but being that I was in New York and a closed adoption, it wasn't until a few years ago where the laws changed, and I was able to have access to a little bit more information to get my original birth certificate.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So throughout that process, I actually did that. Got my mother's name, and but I was curious, but I always had a fantastic relationship with my adoptive family. And I say adoptive family just for clarity here, right?
Yeah.
Like they're my family.
Oh wow. I like that you note that. That's incredible. Yeah. Yeah, the clarity.
The relationship that I have with my mother, my father, my sister is like any other family. And
I think that's very helpful for people to hear.
Yeah. Like to this day, just the other night, my mom and I, we were up, we were just bonding, having deep conversation. And it was interesting, even, when this all got uncovered, it's like, okay, this is my experience, right? This is like what I went through, but it's an experience for them as well.
Yeah. What was it like for them? Like, what has your parents shared about watching you sort of uncover these things and go down this journey and meet family members? I definitely want you to talk to that.
Man, it was, so my mom has this personality. If you ever meet my mom, she's just like this, like always has a smile on her face. She's like high energy, just like this, like love bug. She's the sweetest lady. I know, I'm a little biased
because you're like the sweetest. I think you're the sweetest person. That doesn't surprise me to hear that about your mom.
Yeah, I 100% get that from my mother. I certainly owe that to her. Yeah. But she was so happy. She was so supportive as well. Again, I mean, from as young as I can remember, I knew I was adopted. My sister was, and she's older than me, so we always knew. And throughout that process, she was just very supportive, like checking in. What can I do for you? Like always checking in, because like the week after, 2 weeks after, my cousin reached out on Ancestry, I just like took a break from life. I took time off work, and I was just in it. And I had difficult conversations with them. I talked to my dad, and he doesn't wear his heart on his sleeve as much, right?
A lot of men don't. Yeah. We could get into that too.
Which is funny because I'm opposite of that.
Yeah.
I really do. And talking to him about this, he was really emotional.
Really?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we would be having conversations. I would see him getting choked up. And I know that he had candid conversations, with, other family members, just like, it is difficult. It's something that he has to process because, for him, it's like, this is my son, right? Yeah. Like my parents have always treated me like that. Like this is our child. This is my son. And now I'm showing photos of, like my birth father and my birth mother to them. And for the first time in my life, like we can connect the dots, like, oh, like I have my, my birth father's nose. Like I'll have my birth father's forehead.
Saying that because I mean, again, you've been so open with us here and vulnerable, and like lots goes down off camera that we're talking about and connecting, and you've showed us pictures, and it's like the resemblances was.
It's there. Yeah, absolutely. And so that was, I mean, obviously that was, crazy for me to see because I've never seen that. And then having my parents see that.
Yeah, that's true. Like, and I love everything that you're saying. And again, so helpful that like through and through, you're their son. And so I think there's always this duality of like, you have that piece, but also so probably happy, like you're saying, happy for you to be able to explore this part of your experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So this experience having, come to know my birth family, it's definitely drawn me closer to my family as well.
Really? Oh yeah. Share more about that.
Well, it's last Thanksgiving, my birth family invited me out. It was, like second cousins who invited me out. And so I met a bunch of the family, and it was just great. So like here, one, I was like that lost cousin, right? So everyone welcomed me with, open arms, and they were so warm and so loving. And like, that's a perspective I never had, right? Like I didn't know that, because I just knew that I had that family. Yeah. I didn't know that, like, oh wow, we have family that it was missing. Welcome to the family. And they think I had this huge party and like welcomed me to the party.
I love that story. I love that story so much.
But then again, through that, my family, it was emotional for them. I know my sister, she struggled a bit learning about it, because she had her own journey and she actually flew out to Korea, and ultimately came to, a dead end. Yeah. And so it was tough, and I'm a feeler, right? I feel for others, very strongly. And so when I see someone going through something, that's very heavy on my heart. Yeah. And,
also unsurprising.
Like with my sister, seeing her go through that, knowing what I'm going through and from her perspective, like that was heavy for me.
Yeah, because like you guys have related for so long on this fact that you're both adopted, and then you go on your separate journeys and yours looks quite different. Like you get all these family members, you get really embraced and loved, and unfortunately hers was quite different. She didn't get that.
Yeah. And it's weird because I thought there would be more closure that I have, but it's just like, it's not. I mean, I guess it is a form of closure, like understanding like, where I come from a little bit more, but all that kind of was knowledge, don't get me wrong. Like now I have this, the family that I can bond with, but my family is my family, and that's really like the biggest thing I took away from this, that no matter what, no matter who comes in my life, like that's, my mother is my mother. My father's my father.
Oh my God. I'm like, yeah. And I think, as you've been here from day one and you've been opening up to us and sharing our story, it just felt so important to have you on here because I know, and rightfully so, but I think, if you're going through this fertility journey and it comes down to adoption, I think there's sometimes resistance to that. So I guess what would you say to someone that's maybe at that point where they're, their last option is adoption or they're thinking about adoption?
Every child's journey is different, right? The reason that they were put up for adoption is different. How they handle, everything emotionally is going to be different. And that's the reality of it, right? But what also is a reality is that bond that you can create with that child can be forever. That could be the strongest bond that you'll ever have. And it's given me a perspective that, I know blood relatives now, right? I know blood relatives. And I have, friends who have family that they're not even close with.
Yeah, that's so true. So true.
And so is it possible that you may need to give a little bit more love and nurturing and have a little more understanding of what impact adoption can have on a child? Yeah, definitely. Should you do a little more research and do your due diligence? Yeah, I'd recommend it. Yeah. But it's absolutely a viable option.
Well, it's been, and for you, it sounds like it's been a lovely option.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I grew up in a loving family. I had a great childhood, and, you know, to this day, you know, strong bond, and I can't ask for more. I really can't.
Well, and you're also a dad now.
I am a dad. And you know, the wild thing here is the cousin who reached out to me.
Oh my God. Yes. This is wild. You have to share that.
Yeah. The cousin who reached out to me, his name is Julian. He lives out in Texas, and my son's name is Julian.
I'm so glad yes, that's a wild part of the story too.
Yeah. So it's, it just seemed, you know, serendipitous. You know, unfortunately, you know, Julian's mother and I, we're not together anymore. His mother is Colombian. So, you know, my cousin who reached out, he's Colombian. So, you know, meeting the family, you know, I learned a little bit about that heritage, the Colombian heritage as well. So that helped me get ingrained into the family even more so. So there are a lot of things that just kind of like lined up and were serendipitous.
Yeah, even it's just interesting to think about life in that way, just how things line up or work out. Like, and we're joking before, like, you know, probably never picture yourself doing this or being in the hot seat and everything you've learned since being here. And I so appreciate you sharing this journey. And I think it's so helpful. It's just a different perspective and lens on all the conversations that we're having here. So it's always helpful to have firsthand experience. And I just appreciate like your vulnerability, your openness. You are very sweet. You are someone that is very, like, I think, emotionally in tune. And so I did want to talk about the dating piece, because you are in the dating world and we're always dying to have men on here to share their lens. And I would be curious to hear kind of anything you've taken from here that you use as you date. Like, now that you've heard some stories of other women dating, like, has it helped? Like, what's like top of mind as you're in the dating world? What's being in the dating world like for you?
Being in the dating world is interesting now. You know, getting thrown back into the mix. The perspective I have is completely different. You know, I have a 3-year-old son now. So, you know, anyone who I'm, you know, interested in, like, that's going to be a huge motivating factor. Okay. Like, this is going to be the stepmother to my son, potentially. The key takeaways from what I've heard on the podcast, I mean, there's so much, there's so much, you know, being mindful of what's important to bring to the table, you know, because a lot of the conversations in past episodes, you know, have presented, you know, what's really valuable in a woman's mind when she goes on a date, right? Because from a guy's perspective, it's completely different. You know?
Oh, you have to tell us about that.
Oh man, well, that's like, I don't know how raw we want to get here.
It's all good, whatever you want to share.
But you know, there are a lot of guys out there who are just kind of in it to get another, you know, belt loop in their another notch in their belt, right? Like, so. And then there are guys who truly, genuinely, you know, want to be in a relationship. You know, I read something recently, like, you know, look for a guy who, you know, doesn't want a wife but wants to be a husband.
Ooh, that's amazing.
Because that's the mindset, right? Like, what's the motivating driver in that? And you know, I think, you know, especially now, I feel like we've entered an era where, like, dating is, well, it's very superficial. We know how that is. You know, you put on your best clothes and your best personality, you go out for a drink and, like, hey, I'm amazing, you know, this is why you should sleep with me, or like whatever, right? Yeah. But like, if you want to have a true connection, be vulnerable.
I think a lot of people struggle with that, and that's really, really hard. And I think that when you can't be, and not to say it has to be on the first date, but like, you're really trying to get to know who's in front of you. And if it is the facade of the nice clothes and the whatever best self, you're not going to see that. And I think that's, it's a real barrier when people struggle to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, since I entered the dating pool, like, you know, one of the conversations that I like to have straight out the gate, like, you know, I'm not really here for the small talk. Like, I really want to, like, I want to dive in. Like, I want to get to know you and get to know me. Like, what's the purpose? What's the intent? Right. And I don't think women should be, you know, should hold back in, you know, approaching it like that. You know, if someone wants to get into a relationship and wants something serious, like, the purpose of dating, you know, if you're really looking to get married, what's the purpose of dating? It's going to be getting to know someone, getting to know, you know, how you're compatible. when I was younger, I really didn't, I didn't look at it with that mindset. I've, since then I've definitely grown to be my own person and, understand myself. And it's also, understanding yourself is so important because you start to understand, what you need, what you're looking for in a partner.
Well, you're like dating blindly if you don't know what you want or what you need. And I think through experience and other relationships, you learn that. And it's a lot of work I do with clients is like get really clear on what you need, because otherwise you're going in blind. Like you don't know what you want. You don't know how to recognize like if that person's offering that or not.
Yeah. Yeah. For that deep, true connection, you need to know what your weaknesses are, right? Can the person that you're talking to, can they be someone who can support that?
Yeah. Do you find that going in like deep diving, like you said, do you find that women are surprised by that? Because I think that is not the norm on first dates, or that's not the norm that most men are offering on a first date. Like, let's cut the small talk. Let's dive in. Let's be vulnerable. Have you found that women are like surprised by that?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I've also found that it's created a connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Because when you show that vulnerability, like I've had conversations with this, one person who I'm dating, like, and she said, she was so surprised that, she developed this connection so fast because, one of the first conversations I was vulnerable, and that develops trust, right? That develops a deep connection.
Yeah. And then it invites someone else to be vulnerable too, especially if men are leading with vulnerability, it's much easier for women. I think often men don't. And so women are afraid to be vulnerable. And then you have two people sitting across from each other that are just not.
Yeah. Open. I think my question is like, okay, if you're not going to be vulnerable, like, why is that?
Yeah. And for everybody, there's many, many reasons. There's a real fear to vulnerability.
It is, because it's true. When you're vulnerable, like you're opening yourself up to, get hurt. And what they were talking, I recently heard the difference between transparency and vulnerability. Ooh. Right. And, how does this go? Oh, I forget what that was.
We'll have to find it. But that distinction is probably really huge. I never thought about that, but they can be very different.
Yeah. When you're transparent, you are, it's okay for you to, give a reason of, what you experienced. But when you're vulnerable, it's like, why? Like, how did you get to that?
Attached to it. Mm-hmm. Ooh, I love that. Yeah. I love that. Well, anyone's lucky to be dating you, Drew, because you're great. I have like been so grateful to have you here, part of this journey, because this is all new for me, and it continues to, and continue to learn. But like, you've always been in the background, like just making me feel really comfortable, like no judgment, no nothing, like just, so I imagine when you go out on dates and the women that get to connect with you, like you do the same for them. So I think that's just,
thank you.
Testament to who you are.
I really appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you being here and sharing. And we said to Drew before that he's stuck with us forever.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to be stuck with you forever.
Any parting words for the audience, or anything that you would share based on just your journey? Dating, adoption, fatherhood, vulnerability.
I think a lot of people overlook connection, right? And what can connection look like? It can be anything from a friend to a romantic partner to family. And the bonds that we develop throughout life, we can grow from them. We can learn a lot from them. One of the things that I always try to do is, recognize that who I am today is a part of it is from everyone who I've met and I've connected with in the past, right? So wherever you are, again, whether it's just a friend, if you're in the dating scene, a lot of people listening to this are in the dating scene, yes, you may have that goal, that ambition to, have a family, but also recognize that, like, hey, as you're getting to know people, like that's a season in your life that is valuable.
I love that. I think that's so helpful in dating too, because even if they're not going to end up being your partner, like what value is this going to bring? Like if I'm more vulnerable and there's some kind of connection, what do I learn about somebody else? What do I learn about myself? So like another guest had said this to us. Is Kate, that nothing is wasted. Right. And I think a lot of women, I don't know if men hold the same narrative. You could probably speak to that, but like, it's a waste of time to go on this date. It's a waste of time to go on a next date with this guy. And it's always this idea, it's like a waste of time. But it sounds like what you're saying, it's like, it doesn't have to be. Like there can be some takeaway from that. There can be a point of connection. There can be something that you learn.
100%. You go to a networking event for like a professional networking event, you meet people, right? Yeah. If you go on a date, you're still meeting someone. you know?
I think too, what, you know, as you're talking about like connection and we're talking about vulnerability, I think that's what's been so great about this here. It's like, it's been vulnerable for me to do this, and you've been so amazing and incredible, and you've been vulnerable with us. And I think we have, like, again, you're stuck with us forever. And I think we have this amazing connection because of that, because there's been vulnerability.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. It's funny. I was joking earlier that just like being able to be on this show, you know, like who knows what will come from it, you know?
Well, I'm telling you, you need a documentary, you need a podcast, you need to be talking to other men out there. You need to be doing all of the things. And I think it's also helpful what you said too. It's like, yes, there are men that, you know, want the notch on their belt or just looking for sex, but there are men like you. There are other men out there like you that are looking for relationships and want connection. And I think the frustration for women is like, you know, where are they? So it's helpful to hear, ladies, there are men out there that want really good men that want relationship and connection.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny, a couple of things that I was thinking of, that I heard on the show that I had an opinion on. One, the age difference, right? The age gap.
Oh yes, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I'm 36 years old. You know, I've heard women on the show talking about dating older, dating younger. You know, what do you guys want? Personally, for me, I mean, I'm open. You know, dating older. It's funny. When I was younger, I actually like the girlfriends I had were usually older than I was.
But I think that, yes, okay, I agree with the age thing that it should be about the connection. You definitely have a maturity to you. Like, I wouldn't say you're 36. Like, you just, I don't know, the way you carry yourself, and there's this maturity to you.
I appreciate that. I mean, I don't want to be, pat myself on the shoulder, but I have heard that before.
You should pat yourself on the shoulder. You're amazing.
Well, they say, like 6 years difference, right? Like, that's the women matures like 6 years older.
Yes.
In theory, a guy should be dating someone 6 years, they're junior.
So they line up. Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. For me, that hasn't been a thing. I feel like I've had more enjoyment dating older, honestly.
Let me ask you this, and you don't have to answer this if this is too personal, but I think this is a concern for some men, or what I've heard is that, I don't know if you want more children, and would you then keep the age in mind in terms of fertility and what you've learned here?
Okay, so that's a great question. Do I want more children? Yes, 100% open to it. I grew up with a sister, so, seeing the benefits of having a sibling, yeah, absolutely. I would love for, my son to have a sister. That being said, I'm not closed-minded that if, it's someone older and they're in a place where, they can't, or if they don't want to, it could be someone younger where they don't want to. That wouldn't stop me, because I do have my son and, absolutely love him. If they have children of their own, I've actually found it that okay, if they do have children of their own, there's a certain level of attraction to that because they know motherhood.
Yeah, they get it.
Yeah, they experience it. They're in it every day. Because I'm a father, I'm in it, it's that routine you get in with them, you deal with the temper tantrums and I've noticed dating that there is a difference there. If I'm dating someone who is, younger, who doesn't have any, children, they could envision it, but they don't know it till they're in it. Right. So, I mean, I'm open. I really am, but.
Well, for you, and maybe that was an unfair question, because what's really clear is that you're looking for connection and you're open to whatever that looks like. And it's like the connection has to be right. I ask that because you're a man on this and we want male perspective that, some men, or I've heard some men, they don't want the 37, 38-year-old. They want the 32, 30 or younger. So it's good to hear other perspectives.
And then one of the things that I also remember hearing was just, when it comes to women who are successful or really driven career-wise, and how that can be a deterrent for men.
Intimidation.
Yeah, and that kind of blew my mind, actually. I was surprised to hear that. Yeah, really? Yeah, because that's attractive. I think that's attractive. Someone who is, if there's someone who could, be a mother, but then also want to have a successful career, have that ambition and desire and drive, absolutely. I think that's great.
I find that wild that it blew your mind, because I think as women, it feels so common for women. So that's interesting to hear. It blew your mind. And I love that it doesn't intimidate you, because I think, as women, we want to be with somebody that celebrates our successes and finds that attractive and appealing.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose that could be the difference between boys and men, right? Like,
exactly. Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, you're obviously, like, you have your own business, you're successful, you're very grounded in yourself. And I think that maybe that also allows you to not be intimidated.
Yeah, I like to think so. Yeah. I mean, when I was younger, I didn't have the confidence that I have today. Right. And it took a while for me to grow into who I am and to have that. But I see the difference in how grounded I am. And that changes everything, knowing what check boxes I need in a partner, and knowing, the value I bring to the table, and knowing that, hey, find someone who brings that same value.
Well, you're definitely an evolved man, Drew.
Well, thank you.
But also, just like, you offer this like hopefulness, like that there are men out there like you to women, because there's a lot of frustration with men and with dating. So it's very helpful to hear from a man, and we're very grateful to have you in so many ways and reasons, but to offer this perspective, because we definitely want more men on here. We want everybody to have a voice, and we want to have connection and understanding and vulnerability. So thank you for being in the hot seat today. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for being behind the camera.
Always. I'm happy.
It's just, you make this very easy.
I always get excited when we have the production days.
Well, again, stuck with us. So many more to come.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to offer, if there's anyone who has questions.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
Like, I'm an open book.
So tell people where they can find you if they have. Yeah, that's incredible. Because to have that support as someone that's been through it and knows, what the emotional, journey of that'd be incredible.
Yeah. Social media, Instagram, my username is Drew_Sutton, DRU. So, by all means, if you have any questions, reach out.
Oh, he means that, by the way, everybody. He will get on a call with you.
Yeah. One of the goals that I do have also is to eventually start a nonprofit to help support those who have questions. Yeah.
Well, we'll support. I support anything you do. So you.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Quiet Clock and hearing Drew's story, stay tuned for future episodes, and thank you for listening. If you like the episodes that you're hearing and you want to hear more, please subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for more incredible stories and tools.
When I froze my eggs at 37, I felt alone, I felt unsure, I felt confused and uncertain. And when you're considering such a big decision, feeling those ways do not feel good. So we have created a step-by-step guide to egg freezing so no one else has to feel that way. If you are considering egg freezing, if you're curious about what the process looks like or what you should be thinking about, then this guide is for you. We were really thoughtful in how we put it together. I think it's a great guide. I think it's really comprehensive and covers a lot of the things to be thinking about, to be considering, and maybe some things you didn't even realize you should be thinking about or considering. The goal is to not have anyone feel alone in this journey. So if you're thinking about this decision, sign up through our website, quiettheclock.com, and make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at quiettheclockpod. This is a very big decision, so I don't want anyone to feel alone in it. So if you're thinking about it, grab this guide, and you can also DM me with any questions. I'm here to support you through this decision and this journey.